welcome everybody to the NextGen webinar today with Dr. Leigh Meekins. She's going to be talking about many ages in one setting. Invite you to check out not only this webinar, but also the other webinars that we've recorded so far that can be found up on our website at tnumc.org/nextgen. Take a look at that. So I'm going to let Dr. Leigh go ahead and introduce herself, and then we'll begin this training. Throughout this time frame, we may have some questions that come up, which the folks that are on the call with us have the ability to ask those questions. If you should have questions after watching this webinar, just shoot us an email, and you'll see the email address on the screen to where you can send those questions. So Dr. Leigh, thank you for being here, and you have the screen.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. When talking with Brad about some of the different options for our webinars, one of the things that came up was the question that is often asked: what do you do with the multi-age classroom? What do you do with children who are in one-room Sunday school, and how do you do this? So we decided to do this webinar today and want to be able to try and provide some information for you and give you some guidance in how to think about one-room Sunday school. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, give you an opportunity to see some slides that I have for you. One-room Sunday school, many ages, one space, is an important ministry that we need to be doing for and with children. I have come to an understanding within the last few months especially that our children tend to get isolated with one age group all the time, their own age group, and we need to be more intentional about pulling them together with multiple ages. For many of our children, in many of our churches, we have assumed that one-room Sunday school is for those churches that cannot break out the children into a variety of ages. But yet the ministry with children all in one age group, one group with multiple age groups, is amazing. It's energetic. And there's just so many different opportunities that I think we need to be more intentional about this and be thoughtful about the one-room Sunday school. One of the things that I believe really happens in the one-room Sunday school is that it is not just for small membership churches. It is for larger membership churches, mid-sized membership churches, churches who are planting into new areas. It's an opportunity for churches to look at ministry with children in a very different way. Now, what I will say is that one-room Sunday school, one room with all the different ages, means we have to plan differently. It means we have to think about what is the best age range together, not just what is this immediate group that we're with. So we do have to think differently throughout the process of planning. It is a foundation for multi-generational learning and ministry. Now, that is one of the things many churches really struggle with, is how do you do multi-generational or intergenerational ministry? How do you involve adults and children together, adults, youth, and children together? Well, when we divide everyone up on a routine basis by ages, it is harder to bring them all back together. But if we begin by looking at ministry in a multi-age setting, no matter what the church size, we're creating a foundation for that multi-generational ministry that needs to happen within the local church, within the congregation. You can do multi-age ministry no matter what your situation is, no matter how many groups you have. There are churches out there who pull children together and mix them up intentionally, even in very large congregations. And yet in the small congregations, we know that we don't have enough children to divide them up. So let's be intentional and be excited about the fact that we do get a chance to bring children together. Additionally, children learn from their peers better than they learn from us as adults. It is hard for us as adults to accept that sometimes, but we need to. Children learn from their peers so much better. It's sort of like when you look at membership of a church and how do you grow a church. Congregation members who invite their friends and neighbors and community people will help grow a church faster than the pastor going out going, come on in, come join us. Children learn from each other, and they need to hear from each other. They need to hear each other's opinions and thoughts, even at a young age. And children learn how to lead when they're in these settings, because the older children are invited to help the younger children. And it gives those older children a definition of what it means to lead. It's not just that accidental, oh, you're a leader, let me do something to enhance that, but let's be intentional. Let's ask these children who are fourth graders or fifth graders who know how to read and know how to help write and cut and glue, and ask them to help the 4-year-olds and the 5-year-olds who are just learning those skills, and help them know what it means to be a leader within the church. Now, opportunities with multi-age ministry gives us that chance for the kids to grow in their leadership. It also gives us an opportunity to teach children about respect. Now, one of the things that I believe very strongly is that when children help each other, they learn to respect each other. They learn to understand the other, no matter what age they are. The younger ones learn from the older ones that I'm respected, I'm honored, and I am valued because they're helping me. The older ones learn I can respect. I can be respected because I'm given a role in leadership. And it is helpful for these children. It also is an opportunity for us in the church to utilize our spaces in creative ways. Many times we run out of space in churches, especially if it's a mid-size or a large-size church. Even in a small-size church, you don't always have the right spaces that you would want. But when you're able to pull different age groups together, you can utilize whatever space you have in very, very creative ways. All right, I hope that you will ask me questions. I look forward to hearing from some of you. So do please ask questions as we go through.
So Leigh, I like how you framed that it's not just about lack of numbers, or it's not just about limited space. I like how you framed that it's a learning experience. So talk a little bit more about the dynamic of that, because I know that my kids, I have a 14 and a 16-year-old, and my daughter loves to help out in children's church or in Sunday school with little kids, but I see that that becomes a discipleship thing for her too. So
it does. It really does, because our children need those opportunities to grow into those roles as leaders, and learning about God and about God's love and how Christ was on earth. When we assume that a child cannot mentor another child, we make a mistake, because our children are mentoring each other. They're mentoring the younger children, and they're mentoring each other. They're talking about what it means to have faith. So if a child who is 14 is helping with children's church, they are showing their faith to those children. They're sharing their opportunities of how they were raised already, how they interact with God, how they know God with the younger children. And in turn, the younger children are asking them the questions, how does God love? How is it that God is in my life? And so both age groups are able to interact with each other and grow in their faith and experience of God, which I think is just amazing. Um, we need to stop stopping that stuff. We need to encourage our children to interact together in those settings and develop those relationships. Um, and I've seen this in secular settings in the school systems, especially in private schools, where an older child will be the buddy to a much younger child and will walk through the years of education with them and interact with them sporadically throughout the school year. Now, we can do that more intentionally in a Sunday school setting by saying, okay, we're going to match up our younger children and our older children, and they're going to walk with each other, not just through the educational years of high school and middle school and elementary school, but for life. Because those children, the younger ones, will always know the older one is there walking with me. And they will be with them through college and young adulthood. And then we'll also see the younger children grow into their adulthood. So that's really one of those wonderful opportunities.
So also, I work with a lot of smaller congregations, especially here in Tennessee, and nationwide study showed that 59% of worshiping congregation attendance is under 100. 59% of those congregations have a worship attendance 100 or less. And so often, but I hear the same thing. I hear from churches that are large churches and from smaller churches that their biggest difficulty is they don't have enough volunteers. So how utilizing a one room or a multi-ages, same spaces, how does that help with that? Or does it create a challenge where you might need more supervision? So what's the response on that?
I think it's both. I think that it takes an interesting, wonderful leader who is willing to incorporate the children into the plans in a mixed age group Sunday school. It does take planning. It takes a little more intentional planning to do that. But at the same time, it doesn't take as much adult leadership. Now, for safe sanctuaries and for safe church situations, we always begin with 2 adults in a classroom. And if you've got the 2 adults in a classroom with one taking the leadership role, with a group of 10 or 12 that may be together, and some of those may be 6th graders and 5th graders and 4th graders, with more of them being preschoolers and early elementary, you don't have to do the hands-on as much because you've got the older kids who can help the younger ones. So when you've got 5 or 6 preschoolers who don't know how to cut and glue and love to spill glitter everywhere, you have an older one that can sit there with them and say, all right, I'm going to help you and I'm going to cut out for you while we talk about what does the story mean? Who is God? What is your experience with God? And as a teacher, you can interact with all of the children without having to sit with each child individually because you're pairing up the older and the younger ones, giving the older ones that leadership role as opposed to having to sit with a group of all just preschoolers and cut everything out for them.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you addressed the safe sanctuary, safe spaces issue, an idea, because that's one of the areas that I staff for this conference. And one of the things that I just want to make sure that we're clear too is that these children that might be 6th, 7th, 8th graders, high school kids or whatever, that they're not to be substitutes for adults, and they're not to be unless they're a sibling then they're not going to be the one to help those younger kids go to the bathroom or go down to the restroom or whatever either. That's still going to be the adult's responsibility. But I like the idea that they're able to have conversation and they're able to help with the crafts or with the lesson or even acting out a drama or whatever for it, right? But I like where you went with that. So I don't want to keep stuck on those slides, but keep on moving.
Well, and it is important that we start with our 2 adults, but if you've got a group of, say, 15 kids and there's multiple ages, you don't have to plan for each individual age group to have their own lesson. You can have one lesson that is incorporating all of them, and maybe 2 activities, one for the older, one for the younger, but the older ones can also intersect with the younger ones. So you can plan 2 or 3 activities within a setting, but you don't necessarily have to plan for each age group. Younger, older gives you that flexibility. Part of it also means you take the time to schedule and plan your multi-age setting. And I will never be one of those that says, don't plan ahead. I think you need to be planning for your Sunday school or Bible study at least a week advance, if not more than that. But I also know that our world is crazy, and our people are very, very busy. But if you can take the time 2 or 3 days ahead of time, read through the lesson, know what it is, know what you need, and know what kind of activities you can plan. Also think about having extra activities. It never hurts to have enough curriculum, enough activities, enough filled within the time to run you over. It's better to have too much than not enough. So in that way, we try to make sure that our children have plenty of activities to do and ways to engage with the scripture. With that means thinking about the ages that you've got. And if you're going to have primarily younger elementary and preschoolers, the bulk of the activity needs to sit there, and have one activity for the older kids. If you've got more older kids and less younger ones, you need to have the bulk of the activity with the older ones. I always try to gauge the whole multi-age aspect and look at where's my middle. And that needs to be where I start telling the scripture story, is around the middle. Part of that is also choosing good curriculum that wants to share the scripture story the way you want it shared, that has the theological perspective and is good for your congregation, but is designed for multi-ages in one place, meaning it has a variety of different activities that can be chosen from for one session. Doesn't mean you have to do all of them. It just means you've got a variety of them to look at. So if the curriculum has an activity for very young, for middle elementary and older elementary, you're going to want to have an idea of what those activities are. But if the majority of your group is younger, you're going to want to have the younger activities ready to go, so that you can incorporate them into the session. You've got to know your group. And you can never have enough scheduled when you're talking about multi-ages. Let each other help each other. Let the kids help each other throughout it, okay? Plan for the variety of ages and incorporate the helpers all the way through. Plan for more than what you're going to be able to do, and have different kinds of activities ready to go. The greatest thing about multi-age curriculum is that it's not just one age perspective. It's all the different age perspective. Make sense? Questions? Additionally, make sure that the activities you're choosing are really geared to the age that you want them to be. That you're not just trying to say, okay, I'm going to do one activity for everyone, and hopefully the younger ones will get it, and hopefully the older ones won't barge out on us because they're bored silly. Let's be intentional about the activities that we choose. The activities need to be able to engage the older ones, and then invite the older ones into a relationship with the younger ones. Older kids need direction of how they need to help the younger ones. Don't assume older ones know exactly what to do to help younger ones. So if I've got a classroom that has mostly pre-kindergarten and first graders, and I've got two older elementary, 5th grade, 6th graders together with this group, and I ask them to come help the younger ones, I need to be intentional about what I want them to do with the younger ones. Do I want them to come and help them cut out the pieces and the parts? Do I want them to help glue? Do I want them to come and tell them a story or tell them about God's love? Be intentional about that invitation to the older ones. Otherwise, they'll just sit there and stare at them. Or they will get involved in something that you may not want them to be involved in. You may want them to sit and help cut while you tell the story, but they get to talking immediately, which, by the way, older elementary love to do, is talk and tell stories. So give them direction. Give them an idea of what they need to do to be a leader with your age groups. So in choosing a curriculum, you need to make sure it speaks what you want it to speak and how you want it shared. It has enough activities that you can choose from for the different ages. If you open up a curriculum for multi-age and it only has 2 activities, an older and a younger, that may not be enough. You need to make sure it has enough activities for you to reach all the kids. Additionally, adjust as you're need to. I usually try to aim at the 2nd to 3rd grade level for teaching. Though if you've got a bulk of your kids are much younger, you may need to drop that. So be flexible with that. Make sure that the curriculum you choose can be adjusted for the ages that you have, because sometimes the curriculum is written with the younger kids in mind from the very beginning completely. You need to have curriculum that's also going to pick up for older kids as well as younger ones within that group. Also, one of the things that you might want to do is to choose a multi-age curriculum that also has individual age books available so that you can pick up either a leader guide or a student guide for another age that might help you have some different ideas if you need them. An example and what I really would like to recommend curriculum-wise is Deep Blue Learn and Serve One Room Sunday School. Part of the reason why I like it, beyond it being a good United Methodist curriculum that is sound, is that it also has the Deep Blue Learn and Serve in each of the age levels. So I can pull the One Room Sunday School kit that involves the leader guide, the student books. It has videos, it has music, it has everything you need in one packet. But I can also pick up an older elementary or middle elementary leader guide that would help me have some activities, additional activities for my older children, because it's easier to run out of ideas for older ones than younger ones. If I feel like the younger ones are not, the ideas in the one room are not really what I want for the younger kids, I can also pick up a leader guide for the younger kids and incorporate some of those activities into the curriculum. It gives an opportunity to broaden the amount of curriculum ideas if you've got the different age levels available to you at the same time. So there are a variety of different curriculums out there. There are a lot of different activities for one room. What I would also recommend is that you can take a curriculum and adjust it to be for one room Sunday school. or multi-age Bible study. By making sure that you incorporate different ideas into that, that time period. What would be some activities for the younger kids or the older kids? Now, I've come at this from the perspective of children because that's where I am typically. Another age group that works very well with multi-age together is youth. 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders together, 9th through 12th graders together. There are a variety of different ways to mix up those youth. And you can incorporate with them the same way as you would with children, in that you have to think about each age group in the same setting, letting the older ones mentor the younger ones, letting the older ones be a part of the curriculum development with the younger ones.
And I would ask, talk about the importance of interactive learning in both of these settings. I know I think I've shared with you before that I taught the 4 and 5-year-olds for about 2-3 months. And I had a lot of fun, but it wasn't because I could sit there and teach a 4 and 5-year-old about the story. It was through doing something with their hands while we were having conversation. So I'll talk about that a little bit.
And that doesn't change with ages. Preschoolers, most especially, are very active and their attention span is very short. Older kids, older elementary into middle school and high schoolers are equally as active and want to engage. Their attention span is longer. So in that setting, you can incorporate the older kids into helping the children have an experience of coloring or cutting out and gluing or putting together a puzzle while the story is being told, or while they tell the story to the child. Allowing the older kids to have an opportunity to tell the story to the younger ones gives the older ones an opportunity to learn and know the story, not only in their mind, but in their heart as well. So if I am sitting with a group of children and I've got 5 or 6 preschoolers or young elementary kindergartners and 2 or 3 older elementary middle schoolers, they can sit together, they can color together, and with a picture of Noah's Ark, they can talk about the animals and how Noah listened to God and had an experience with God in building the ark. And the younger ones will ask questions. And by having that experience together, by having that opportunity, the attention span of the younger ones will be longer than if you just sit in a circle and tell the story. When you sit in the circle and tell the story, the younger ones are going to poke on the one next to them. They're going to roll all over the floor, but so will the 5th and 6th graders. They all need to have an experience and to engage their senses, their mind, their hands, their eyes, all of it in the process of being told a story and engage the story.
Now, do you recommend that, like, if you have a setting where you are going to utilize the older kids, to do some training sessions with them out before they're actually in Sunday school, try to do some leader training with them or not?
I would love for that to happen. That's the ideal. The practical is that you never know who you're going to have in Sunday school till you walk in the door. So in that case, you have to know what leadership looks like. You have to know what it is you want the older ones to do specifically so that you can give them direction. They learn leadership skills in the doing, not in the teaching ahead of time, but actual doing of the leadership. Because you may plan, I'm going to utilize my 4th and 5th graders in this one-room Sunday school with the younger children, and I'm going to teach on outside before Sunday school how to be leaders, and then the next Sunday, none of them show up. because there was a football game or their parents were out late. There was a reason why they didn't show up. But you had 2 additional 5th graders you've never seen before walk in the door. So you have to actually be able to say, okay, here's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to sit with Betty Jo over here, and I want the 2 of you to cut out this piece of paper together while I tell the story, and engage them in the leadership process by doing. Now, if you do have some volunteers with middle school and high school who want to be a part of Sunday school on a regular basis, planning ahead of time, giving them the training, walking through what does it mean to be a leader in a younger child's Sunday school or in a mixed group Sunday school. What are some ways to be a leader? And what does that look like would be fabulous, especially if you can get their commitment on a regular basis to be there, say 2 out of 3 Sundays during a month, and giving them that responsibility as well as those skills. That would just be incredible. You are then building on the foundation of the leadership of the whole church, not just that Sunday school program. How's that in that sense? Does that something that you think could happen in a Sunday school for you?
I think about, I know in mine, I'd love for Diantha or if Scott has something they would like to ask or add. I would love for them to share, but they're still both muted, so keep on going.
Multi-age Sunday school, multi-age Bible studies is not just for children. It's all ages. If you can figure out how to do multi-age with children, you can then begin to expand this into multi-age with adults included for the whole church. One of the curriculums that I've seen work with all church is the table talk, and being able to plan a Wednesday evening time where you have a meal, and then as a church we sit down and we have something that we talk about at the table. The more variety of ages you have at the table, the richer that conversation becomes, because the 5-year-olds can really express how they know God in their own way, as well as the 90-year-olds. And to have them sitting at the table together, and a 18-year-old, a middle schooler, a high schooler sitting there with a kindergartner saying, I know God loves me. And the preschooler going, yeah, God loves me too. And that just adds to the depth of the family of God communication and family of God faith. And I think that we as a congregation anywhere can do that and need to do that. Scott, what are some of your experiences? Does this make sense for you? Are you able to ask or engage in any way? Thank you. He says it does give him an opportunity. It's an important thing to do. The more opportunities that we give our churches to do multi-age, I think the better we will be in the long run for how we're able to do ministry and to grow our churches. Because churches are looking for places where everyone can come together. And when children are together in multi-age settings, then we are able to add to that even more by involving the adults and growing that multi-age ministry. Brad, any other questions?
No, I just remember we did a study one year. Adam Hamilton had written a study on missions, or it was a mission-oriented study that he did. And this was for adults, older adults, adults, and youth. We split up the groups. They came in the first weekend that we had it, and everybody drew a number. Like, I think I was in a room that had 8 tables or 9 tables, and there were like 7 or 8 chairs at each of those tables. And so we drew a number, and it had table 8, number 1, or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what ended up happening was you had very diverse age group settings at each of those tables. And what I saw were 2 things really in the interaction. There was great questions and great discussion going back and forth between the ages, but on the other side too, I saw that the adults were impressed with the level of thought that some of the young people at the table were putting into it, and the young people became more connected to those older adults who heard stories about how they interacted with it. So it was such a great setting. And we, the church where I attend, we tend to be age level Sunday schools from elementary or little kids all the way up to the older adults, right? So, but it was a disruption, and it was something that those and this was several years ago, but it's something I think that was very transformational for the people that were in the room.
Jean Piaget always said that what entices learning is to have that disruption. You have to have that disruption, that part that makes the world messy. And in the process of evening it back out, you gain knowledge. And by bringing people together in these multi-age groups, you have a disruption that causes things to be different. And we have to ask questions differently, and we have to communicate differently. And when we do that and let it work, it evens back out again, and we've got learning in there. So not only do you have the learning of, oh my gosh, they have a story to share with me, but you have a opportunity to know that God's still working with the older adults as well as with the young teenagers. And it's the same with children as well, that you get that opportunity for the older ones to interact with their faith and to articulate their faith, because we're asking them to tell a story. And if they tell the story of God's love during Noah's Ark to 5-year-olds and kindergartners, then they're having an opportunity to articulate their faith. And our faith has to grow through articulation. And that's one of the best ways to teach it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important to remember, that that articulating our faith is a key part of faith development. There's a book by Amanda Hunts Drury called Saying is Believing, and it talks about the art of storytelling, and also not only telling story, but also receiving other people's story. And what I find that we're missing that a lot of times in church, and we have great pastors, and I'm good friends and love my pastor. But most likely in many places, that pastor is the one that we're hearing the most of on a Sunday morning, or that Sunday school leader, if it's a leader-driven Sunday school curriculum, right? So my utopian space for a Sunday school or a worship environment would be there somehow to allow people to tell their story, so that there's this, one, a disruption that happens, and 2, there's an intermingling of stories, right? And there's this interaction of stories. So question then, so how do we make that happen in a church that says, but we have Sunday school, this is a great idea, but we don't need to do it because we've got these Sunday school teachers, or we've got these age level classes. How could you help us make the case that once in a while, maybe once a quarter, maybe twice a year, maybe, if we're daring once a year, how do we make that case to do this change, to have a disruption like this possibly?
Well, we make the case based on being able to share God's love and experience with each other. And that it doesn't have to happen in Sunday school. If you've got age level Sunday school, fantastic. What are some other settings then that we can look for multi-age educational settings? What are some other places? Can we do it on a mission field with children and parents and youth all coming together to do a mission activity? Or can we look at a Bible study? How can we involve children, youth, and adults, or youth, adults, and older adults in a Bible study together so that they learn together? It doesn't have to happen in Sunday school. If you're in a large membership church and you've got the age divisions, and in some of those churches, they have 25, 35-year-olds. Well, it's hard to blend 25, 35-year-olds with 25 or 30 sixth graders. But if you say, okay, let's do some activities that are different. Let's do a fun time. Let's do some activities once a month that involve all the different ages coming together to learn together, mixing up. I like the idea of this study where everyone came in one room and you pulled a number and you figured out where your seat was. How can we mix them up even at dinner on Wednesday nights when we have fellowship dinner? Can you as a parent invite your 7-year-old to go sit with someone else in the congregation and have supper with them? And invite the people at that table to talk about how God is involved in their lives? That could be an incredible way to involve multi-age ministry in an intentional way. How can you all come together to study one piece of scripture for the holidays, for Lent? Can we study a particular study over those 6 weeks in a larger group? Or have a retreat, but in that retreat setting, we don't divide up and the youth go over here, the children go over here, and the adults go over on the third part. Can we all sit in one room? Can we have more than just worship time together? Can we invite a guest speaker or a guest preacher that's going to be a storyteller, that's going to involve and invite the children to be a part of the worship time and the time together, as well as the older adults? It has to be intentional.
I like that. I hear about churches that do a family retreat, and in fact, I was asked to come and be a part of a family retreat for a church, and I said, oh, that's great. I'm excited about being in a space where we'll be with parents and youth and children and so on. And they said, oh, no. You're going to come in and you'll help lead the youth programming part of it. And I said, so I actually turned it down because I said, well, how is that? I think I may have offended them. I said, how is that then a family retreat? It's like what's happening usually on a Sunday morning, right? And so I think those kind of, if we're going to do retreats that are called family retreats, there might be times where you do training specifically for parents or whatever, right? And have that separation time. But the meat of that retreat, I believe, for discipleship's sake, needs to be truly family interacting, and not just the familial family, the biological family or whatever, the household, the family of the church, the family of God, like you said, so that my children realize that there are other people that care and love them just like we do, and that God loves them even more than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
I agree. And, when we also talk about how do we get that started, one of the other places in Sunday school, besides using one room Sunday school, would be to use large group, small group. Invite everyone to come in together. And this could be church-wide. We used to have many, many, many years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, assembly time, Sunday school assembly time. That was the original large group, small group. Everyone came together for a large group setting with the assembly, and there was the Bible story was told, offering was taken, songs were sung, and prayers were prayed, and then everyone divided up into their respective Sunday school classes. Why can't we go back to offering that assembly time, that large group time for all ages? And whether it be all the ages of elementary and children, or all the ages of the whole church coming together to talk about God before you break off into other groups.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just another way to begin to say multi-age ministry is vital to the life of the church.
Well, and I know that Scott in February or January will talk about the importance of parents and these intergenerational modeling for discipleship. And I think what we're talking about here is getting down into those the more the lack of separating, like the desegregation of ages that often drives programming.
Mm-hmm.
And so when and as I was thinking about working with smaller churches this last year, a couple of words came to mind, and I was a science teacher before, so the terms of finite and infinite, and we think often in development and educational development, spiritual development in finite terms. Like, how do I help a preschool child? What am I going to do with this preschool child to get them to the place of where they're able to do this more? And so that's a finite space. Elementary, children, youth, all of these finite spaces that have definite beginning and ending timeframes, right? But if we look at how are we thinking in an infinite space, how are we thinking that we're going to do and be engaged with them in their faith nonstop, so that they can see that that their faith just doesn't happen at church or in Sunday school, or it's not just a place that they discuss it is in the Sunday school classroom or in the church sanctuary, but it can happen at the dinner table. It can happen on the playground. It can happen in other places, right? And I think that's part of that recapturing our faith identity that this many ages, one setting has the potential to do,
It does. It really does. And our children need to see faith modeled not just by their parents, but by everyone around them. If they're not watching how to be faithful people, they're not going to learn it.
Yeah.
They have to see it lived out.
Right.
And that's in multi-age groupings.
Mm-hmm. Well, Diantha or Scott, if you have anything you want to share, Leigh, do you have more that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, Brad, one of the things that just came to mind while I was listening to you was that as a youth myself, one of the things my church did was every quarter, everyone came together and there was a selection of Sunday school classes and a topic for the next quarter. And you got to select which class you wanted to be a part of based on the topic for the next quarter. So a lot of times I was sitting in youth Sunday school, not just with 7th or 8th graders my own age, but with 12th graders and 6th graders and 10th graders. And we all came together because it was an important topic. Children can do that as well. As a whole Sunday school, one month a year or one quarter a year, they can make a choice of what is it they want to do during Sunday school. Do they want to do this activity or do they want to study this, and invite the mixed ages to be together? That's a great way to do multi-age when you don't necessarily have to do multi-age.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, you can mix middle schoolers and upper elementary very easily for that. I am one of those that really I struggle with putting 12th graders and first graders in the same setting. But at the same time, if we're intentional about 12th graders being models and mentors for the first graders, then it's a great opportunity. We also have to remember that spiritual development is at different levels than actual mental and age development. And sometimes there are 10th graders who are on the same spiritual level as 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
And we need to embrace that. And how do we help both of them move to the next level?
Yeah. And from a youth perspective, or and it depends upon the church that you're in and the sort of the framework of what they believe is the right age for confirmation. But I've started to hear more and more of churches that, because we have in some places, a generation of parents or caregivers who they themselves are maybe new to church, or they didn't go through confirmation when they were younger. And so, so some of those, some places are offering confirmation for parents, for caregivers, and their youth at the same time. They can break into small groups in different age levels, or they can have the opportunity to ask questions and be together in that space. But I think that's a cool idea, because I know from past experiences that we were confirming students or kids, and their parents weren't. And so I think that led to some of the departing from church issues also. It's like they didn't see, they saw it as something to check off their list as opposed to something that could be done as a family, or as a value for in their relationship, and I think trying to think differently about how we do some of that can also change the future for faith development as well. And many ages, it falls in that area,
Yeah. Yeah. And it could also be one of those settings where you offer 2 different classes.
Yep.
So that the parents and children can choose which is going to be best for them.
Yep.
And a parent may not necessarily be in the same class as their child, but they may be in the class with other children.
Mm-hmm.
And because I may not want my mother there with me.
Right,
I may
exactly.
really want my mother there with me
Mm-hmm.
as a 5th or 6th grader or an 8th grader. But having that opportunity to interact in multi-ages could be very, very important for faith development and respect from our younger ones to our older ones, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I think it teaches that learning. It teaches listening. It teaches learning, appreciation, empathy. It teaches both adults and youth and younger people that their story isn't the only story. Their interaction or their question about a scripture isn't the only question, or that they're so that one, they don't feel like they're the only one that has question or has doubt, but that two, they have somebody else that they can discuss those things with, right?
Right.
And so
developing mentor relationships all through the same process.
Mm-hmm.
Without artificially saying, all right, we're going to pair up mentors. You're going to be paired with this one, whether you know them or not. Y'all are going to be they're going to be your mentor.
Mm-hmm.
But when you've got multi-ages together, the mentor process happens organically, rather than artificially.
Yes.
And you see that as a lifetime mentor versus just for confirmation or just for this period of time. It becomes something that is a lifeline all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Well, we're coming up on the end of our time together, and I really want to thank you, Dr. Meekins, for sharing your knowledge with us, and that if you would have interest in connecting with Dr. Meekins, you can see her contact information is there on the screen. Share about the new work that just came out, Wonderfully Made, a little bit. And you can, if you'll stop sharing your screen for a minute where you're going to be full screen, then there you go. And share a little bit about Wonderfully Made.
Wonderfully Made is the sexuality education for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. Some of you may be familiar with Created by God. This is a replacement of Created by God. It's taking Created by God just to the next level, bringing it to the current times. It's more about, we deal a lot more with social networking, sexuality, issues related to social networks, social being on the media and all of that. It goes through the anatomy. It talks about relationships with God, what God chooses and wants for us for our life. And it's really about teaching 4th, 5th, and 6th graders how to begin making decisions for their life now versus waiting until they're in the back seat of the car with someone. They need to know how God created them, that God created them wonderfully, no matter who they are, no matter how they were created. They're created by God in a wonderful way. And it is an amazing piece of curriculum, not just because my name's on it, but because it's good. And it's an important issue that we need to be talking with to our children, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, younger as well as older. But this is particularly the age group that I've been working with. It is a student book that is also a workbook. It's not just read through and here's the knowledge, but read through and work through. There is also a lot more prayer involved in it and a process of introspection and thinking about what God wants for us at this point in time in our lives, as well as the future.
I like the idea that you have brought social media and technology into it because, as you know, that, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders and even probably younger, I think somewhere around 73 to 80% of those kids have smartphones or devices that are like that, whether it's a tablet or a phone or a computer. And so helping them understand how to interact in that space, in a space where it can be highly easy, the access to that information about sexuality and other things is just one click away, even if it's, sometimes it might be intentionally, most of the time, and most likely it's always accidentally that it happens. And then knowing how to get out of that, and knowing how to process that. And I'm thankful that y'all have added that to the curriculum. So
it's an important piece, and children 4th, 5th, and 6th grade are much more mature today than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They're a lot more savvy. They're exposed to a lot more, and we need to help them understand what it is they're exposed to and make decisions about it in terms of how they want to live their lives.
Well, Dr. Leigh, thank you so much for being with us. We want to thank Diantha and Scott for hanging out with us, and we'll be sharing this. And our next webinar will be recorded in January. We're looking forward to having Scott with us to share about whole life discipleship. And just wanted to say have a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next month.